On today's show, is it time for the Kings to throw in the towel? Who is Sacramento's best player? And Barry and I have a special announcement to make. That's all coming up on the Royal Report.
Good morning. Welcome back to Royal Rebounds, a Sacramento Kings YouTube channel for fans by fans. This is the Royal Report, a Sacramento Kings sports talk show where we wrap up an entire week of Kings action in about 30 minutes. If you are a Kings fan, make sure you smash up that like button down below and please consider subscribing to the channel. This is episode 20.
Yeah, thanks again for being here, everyone, on another fantastic Friday. We have a lot to get to today, so let's jump right into some league news. As the season begins to wind down, this is the time when everybody wants to be playing their best basketball, Barry. One of those teams that might be peaking at the right time are the Minnesota Timberwolves. Pretty much locked into the 7th seed at this point. The T-Wolves have won 6 games in a row. It's the first time they've done it since Kevin Garnett played for the franchise back in 2004. They are a full 9 games ahead of the Lakers, who are in the 9th spot in the Western Conference play-in tournament. Barry, very surprising season from Minnesota.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this team has had a ton of talent on the roster for a few years now, and we've all been wondering when they're going to finally put it all together, play like a team. There was the infamous practice with Jimmy Butler and trashing all those guys saying they don't work hard enough. They seem to be working a little bit harder now, Calvin, and the pieces are finally seeming to fit in Minnesota. I'm happy for them, and I think it'll be exciting for a lot of Minnesota fans to watch them in the playoffs this season. Speaking of teams not in the playoffs, the Oklahoma City Thunder will be without guard Lu Dort through the remainder of the season. After playing just 51 games this season and averaging 17 points and 4 assists, Lu Dort is out for the remainder of the season after successful surgery on a torn labrum in his shoulder. Very exciting player who started out as a defensive juggernaut and has slowly gotten better and better at scoring in the NBA. They are definitely going to miss him through the rest of the season, but it doesn't sound like it will be too serious, and we all know the Thunder are trying to lose games anyways.
Yes, they certainly are, and they will sorely miss Lu Dort, who really has turned himself into a very nice player in the NBA. As far as made men in the NBA, I'm talking MVP caliber players. The MVP race could be a very tightly contested one here down the stretch. Joel Embiid has played arguably his best season of his career. Ja Morant has burst onto the scene. Oh yeah, Giannis is still there. And there's another guy they call the Joker who's been playing pretty well lately, Barry. He had an impressive week. It was only 3 games, but listen to these numbers. 38.6 points per game, 15 rebounds, and just a shade over 10 assists, 1 steal, and 2 blocks, all while shooting 62% from the field and 43% from 3. The guy is definitely making a case for yet another MVP here.
Yeah, he's a truly incredible player, and he has destroyed the Sacramento Kings this season. The Kings went 0-4 against the Nuggets, and we actually just saw him in this past week of basketball where he did a ton of damage to Sacramento. He is by far the best passing big in the NBA. In other news, the Celtics are surging. They won 17 out of the last 20 games, and they have a date with the Sacramento Kings next Friday, Calvin. They're quickly rising up the Eastern Conference standings, while the Kings seem to be just sitting just out of the play-in picture. Yes, Calvin, I did say the word, the play-in picture. It will be an exciting game next Friday, but the Celtics are absolutely playing out of their mind right now.
Jason Tatum has been absolutely sensational lately for the Celtics, averaging over 45 points a game for a 3-game stretch there. Guy is really filling it up.
Yeah, they also have a ton of talent, and it's just a matter of when they're able to put it all together. They've been shuffling players the past few years, with Al Horford, sending him out, bringing him back, Kemba Walker, the experiment failed, Kyrie Irving, all that stuff, but they still have a ton of young talent on this team, and I expect them to just get better and better as the years go on. Speaking of better, the Kings did not do better this week. They're 0-3, losing all 3 games this week. A buzzer beater loss against the Dallas Mavericks this week, which was quite unfortunate. Then the Kings get absolutely worked by the New York Knicks, probably their worst second half of basketball this entire season. They just completely fell apart. We saw Dimanta Sabonis get ejected in that game and actually get suspended for the following game due to contact with a referee, where the Kings seemed to have a chance against the Nuggets, and then the Nuggets just pull it out there at the end.
Yeah, in true Kings fashion, it was another roller coaster week, right? Big leads in both first halves of both the Dallas Mavericks game and the New York Knicks game. No Luka Doncic. So you're feeling great at halftime at both of those games. Then they come out in the second half like a completely different team. Dallas gets to the rim at will, gets to the free throw line, and Julius Randle goes supernova for the Knicks in that second half. 83 points scored for the Knicks in the second half. It is the second most points scored by any team in one half this season, Barry. It was a truly disgraceful performance. And then they wrap it all up with a very confusing game against the Nuggets, missing Sabonis, yet they actually played their best game of the week and had a really good chance to win down the end. Played really good defense in that game as well.
Yeah, Calvin, I heard some fans have been wearing bags on their heads this week. I'm not sure if you saw that or not.
It's getting ugly out there.
It really is.
Speaking of ugly, the Kings go winless again this season. They are now 20 games below 500 at this point, and just barely, as you mentioned, sitting on the outside of the play-in picture. I'm not sure if there's any chance left for them after this week to make that postseason, Barry, but it has certainly been a disappointing season for this Kings team, both the team that started the year and the team that we have now after the trade deadline. Both of those rosters you expected to be better than the way they have performed so far. Barry, what hope is there going into next season?
Oh, there's no hope right now. I mean, ask me in another week or so, maybe my mind will be different, but this Kings team is not looking good right now. I think it's very, very clear that this is not a good basketball team. But, Calvin, there's been some discussions this week about who is the best player on this Kings team, whether it's Dimanta Sabonis, whether it's Darren Fox, potentially Harrison Barnes. So, Cal, best player on the Kings roster, and go.
Well, yeah, we did get into a little debate on this on the Royal Rebounds podcast the other night. James Ham's on record saying that Dimanta Sabonis is the Kings' best player. In my opinion, it's still going to be Darren Fox. I think I maybe evaluate this slightly differently than most people. When I look at who I think is the best player on a team, it's not so much what their accolades are. Certainly that has an effect on it. I'm talking about the fact that Sabonis is a two-time All-Star, things like that. He's second in the league in rebounding, or the only player to average X amount of stats, points, rebounds, while shooting over 50% from the field. All of those are great. But in terms of basketball skill, basketball ability, Darren Fox is by far the most talented person on this team. He's one of the most talented players in the entire league. He can do things that just frankly a lot of people cannot do. And when it comes to evaluating basketball talent, to me, guards are always going to be better and more skilled, more talented players than big men. It's very hard to compare somebody who's 6'1" to somebody who's 7 feet tall. But you have an advantage athletically if you're 6'1" to 6'5" or so, right? So to me, Darren Fox hasn't quite gotten there yet with the recognition. He hasn't been given the All-Star nod. He hasn't made an All-NBA team or anything like that. But when it comes to pure basketball ability, he's by far the most talented player on this team.
Yeah, I agree with you. De'Aaron Fox is averaging 19 and 6 for his career. Dimanta Sabonis is averaging 14 and 9. Sabonis definitely has the accolades. The 2 all-star nods definitely puts him a leg up as far as accolades go. But if you're just judging talent, if you're just judging the best overall player on this team, I got to agree with you, Cal. I got to go Darren Fox. I think the guy that has the ball in his hands, and don't get me wrong, Sabonis is an amazing passer, and he can set up his teammates. But I think the guy that has the ball in his hand is more valuable. And I think that's Darren Fox. I think that he has a lot more skill, a lot more talent. Yes, he's not as tall, but position-wise, what he does for this team, and just his overall skill level, Darren Fox is a better player. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to try and figure out what's going on with Rashaan Holmes. Well, Calvin, Rashaan Holmes is out again after dealing with multiple eye injuries, COVID, then a back injury. Now Rashaan is out due to personal reasons. It's been a really tough season for Rashaan Holmes, dealing with family member stuff, dealing with injuries, dealing with losing his starting position to Dimanta Sabonis due to that big trade. Now he's out again due to personal reasons. He's played 1 out of the last 8 games. He only played 15 minutes in that game, and it was quite underwhelming as far as the performance goes. Calvin, what is going on with Rashaan Holmes? Do you think we'll see him through the rest of the season? And do you think he'll even be on this Kings team next season?
I think you can already mark it down and put it in the books that we've seen Rashaan Holmes play his last game with the Sacramento Kings. It doesn't really make much sense at this point with only 14 games to go. To think that they would try to work him back into the lineup now after he's been in and out, as you mentioned, pretty much all season long. He hasn't been able to get any sort of rhythm. Now he's been taken out of the starting lineup. He really has become the new Marvin Bagley of this team. It's very unfortunate, the type of year that he's had. You got to feel for Rashaan. He's had to deal with a lot of adversity, both with the physical injuries he's had this year and everything going on in his personal life. Now he has his starting job taken away. He's definitely out of sync playing with the new group of Kings players and the Kings players that come off the bench. Doesn't look like the same guy. Definitely misses Tyrese Haliburton. And, there were a lot of rumors around the trade deadline that involved Rashaan Holmes at that point in time. So I definitely think that you're going to see him moved this offseason. He just doesn't seem to fit in with this Kings team anymore.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate because, Rashaan was a big favorite for a lot of us Kings fans. We do root for him. We wish the best for Rashaan. But I think I agree with you. I don't know if he's going to play another game this season, and I think he's probably going to be packaged with a draft pick or another player this offseason to try and bring in some more talent to Sacramento.
Yeah, we wish him the best. Obviously, if he doesn't come back to Sacramento next year, wherever he does end up, we all as Kings fans would love to see Rashaan play well and be successful.
Unless it's the Lakers.
Unless it's the Lakers, yeah. Another player that was out, not quite for personal reasons, except for maybe he lost his temper, would be Dimanta Sabonis, who missed the last game against the Denver Nuggets due to a 1-game suspension for making contact with an official after he was ejected when the Kings blew their second-half lead against the New York Knicks. Barry, the question is, did that suspension cost them the game against the Denver Nuggets? Did it cost them more than that, perhaps a shot at the play-in tournament?
Well, I was really surprised the Kings were actually in that Denver game, without Sabonis. But if you look ahead of that, they played 2 games just a month or so or less before that, lost both of those, and that was with Fox and Sabonis on the court. So I wouldn't expect them to win this Nuggets game, even if Sabonis was on the court. And as far as the play-in goes, I think that ship has definitely sailed. But I'm calling BS on this call, Calvin. I don't think that he deserved to be ejected in that game. I don't think he deserved to be suspended. I do understand the rules. I understand the need for that rule. I just want to see some consistency here. We've seen multiple times this season where players have made contact with referees, whether it's shoving, pushing, it's accidental or on purpose. Dimanta Sabonis is the one that gets suspended. And this guy is one of the nicest guys in the league that never really complains, never has any issues at all. So it's just unfortunate to see stuff like this happen, and it's just not called the same for Sacramento as it is for some of these other teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. It definitely wasn't the most egregious thing that I've ever seen from a player on a basketball court. However, it's hard for me to get behind it not being deserving, just because the officials have made it very clear, and the league has made it very clear over the years, really ever since the malice at the palace, I guess, that if you make contact with an official, it's not going to end well for you, whether it's a suspension, a major fine, things like that. I agree there wasn't a ton of contact, and I also agree with you that the real problem here is that this deciding whether or not this is a suspension can be sometimes arbitrary, and other players have done things like this and not been suspended for similar acts. That being said, it didn't cost them the game, although I do think the one area where the Kings really lost this game was rebounding. They gave up a ton of offensive rebounds, got out-rebounded as a whole for the game, and Sabonis would have definitely helped with that. The question is, would it have been enough for them to actually get over the hump and win the game? It was a close game, so they would have had a shot, but I'm not sure you can say that him being out definitely cost the Kings this game.
Yeah, and on that subject, Calvin, it's official. The Kings suck again. After losing 3 games this week, they are currently 24-44. They are now 20 games below 500. Somehow they are still mathematically eligible to make the play-in. I don't know how much longer that will last. But Calvin, I am throwing in the towel here. I think this season is officially over for your Sacramento Kings. I think it's time to, take out some of these older players, rest them. I want to see what I can get from these younger players. I want to see some chemistry building. I need to know what I can get out of certain guys going into next season. And for me, one of the most major things in finishing this season is preventing injuries. I couldn't stand having an injury to a guy like Harrison Barnes, Darren Fox, or Dimanta Sabonis heading into next season. So I'm probably looking to shut them down pretty soon here, Cal.
Yeah, stick a fork in them. They're done. The Kings season, I think, is definitely over. Last week when we did this show, they only had a 0.3% chance of making the postseason, and then they lost all 3 games this week after that. So it really doesn't feel like there's much hope or much of a chance left. I think you're right. It is time to get some of these younger guys some minutes, see what you've got. The problem with that is that they traded for a whole list of new players at the trade deadline who are all supposed to be pretty impactful players. So those guys, I think, are still going to have to get the majority of the minutes here down the stretch, because this is a huge offseason for Sacramento, and they really need to decide what direction they're taking here. The idea is that they're going to make a big push to get a third star caliber player in here. You're going to have to decide here which pieces of this team are going to be kept on that roster moving into next season and which ones are going to be shipped out, because you're definitely going to have to move some guys around in order to acquire a player of that caliber. So it's going to be an interesting finish to the season. I don't think you're going to see any of these guys get shut down personally.
Okay, we will see. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we jump into my favorite section of the show, Cowbell Questions.
Welcome back to the Royal Report. It is time for Cowbell Questions here, where we take all your burning Sacramento Kings questions and answer them to the best of our ability. Vinny, give us number 1 this week.
How do you think our depth compares to last year or a few years back?
Well, on paper, it's certainly better. I mean, the team, I think, going into this season and then after the trade deadline, both of those rosters, you would have to say, are some of the more deep teams that the Kings have had in recent memory. Adding young, high draft talent Guys like Davion Mitchell, having a guy like Buddy Hield, who is normally a starter in this league, come off the bench. They added championship experience in Tristan Thompson. That's all before the trade deadline. And we were all praising this team in that their bench was one of the strongest attributes of this team. Then the trade deadline rolls around, and they actually got better. I mean, on paper, you would have to say that this team, talent-wise, is better than any team that we've seen in Sacramento in recent years. The problem is they just haven't put it together. So I think the answer to the question is yes, they are deeper than in years past. The team just hasn't performed again, which seems to be a reoccurring theme here in Sacramento, Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. We appreciate your question. The only time I would actually look back and say potentially the Kings were deeper was having Isaiah Thomas coming off the bench. You know, I think that he never reached his true potential on the team, but I don't think you could point to anybody on this Kings team right now coming off the bench and say they were a better player right now than Isaiah Thomas was at the time. But overall, yes, I think this team is a much deeper team than it has been. But for me, I'm in the same boat as you, Calvin. What is the point of depth when they can't play together? Next question.
Most surprising team this season?
Well, this is tough. You know, you could mention a bunch of different teams here. You know, the Brooklyn Nets are currently in the 8th seed in the East, which is quite surprising. The Knicks have fallen from glory. Atlanta has fallen as well. If you were to look over in the Western Conference, you still have Phoenix at the top there. And you also have the Golden State Warriors up there. But for me, Calvin, the biggest surprise of the season, I got to go with the Memphis Grizzlies. They have the number 2 seed in the West. They are playing incredible. Ja Morant is playing incredible. And the team is even winning games when Ja Morant is not available. I think this is my surprise team this season.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Memphis has definitely arrived, and they're probably arriving sooner than most people would have expected. It's funny that you mentioned teams like the Nets, even the Lakers. You know, depending on how you look at this, most surprising could go one of two different ways. I'm going to go with the Chicago Bulls. I know that it's maybe not as surprising for them to be this good right now as the Grizzlies because they added all these veteran players. But, you know, we heard DeMar DeRozan was one of the worst, if not the worst, free agent signing last summer. They overpaid for him. There was the whole tampering incident with Lonzo Ball. You weren't really sure how it was going to work. And for Chicago to be in first place in the Eastern Conference, a much better Eastern Conference, by the way, for a good portion of this season, despite all the injuries that they've had, I'm going to take the Chicago Bulls as most surprising. Next question.
Maybe the Kings need to do some tampering this offseason or something.
Do you have any playoff predictions?
That the Kings will not be in the playoffs. It's going to be a fun postseason. I'm actually very much looking forward to the Eastern Conference playoffs. It's totally loaded there. To think that the Nets could match up in a first-round series with the Philadelphia 76ers potentially. You have Ben Simmons returning to Philadelphia to play this time rather than just sit on the bench. Not to mention the James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving beef. You've got the Cleveland Cavaliers in there, who are another one of the more surprising teams. And I think that the top teams in the East are really going to slug it out there. So as far as who wins, I'm not really sure at this point. There are a lot of teams, I think, that have a shot at taking home the finals or taking home the trophy this season. Milwaukee and Phoenix still stand out to me as the two favorites from both conferences, though.
Yeah, I'll give you a little prediction here, and I'm actually heading to Vegas next week, so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks are going to repeat as champions. I think Jokic will win MVP, but I think that Giannis will win Finals MVP, and he will end up with a second trophy.
Mark it down. You heard it here first.
Not financial advice.
That is all the time we have for Cowbell Questions. Thank you guys so much for your submissions. Again, if you'd like to have Barry and I answer a question of yours on a future show, just write it in the comment screen below this video and hashtag it Cowbell Questions.
Yes, thank you all for all your questions. We really, really appreciate it. And we really enjoy doing this show for you all. I want to give a couple quick shout outs here to Makami, Fred, Mike, Matthew, Sass, Gothan, Dennis, Skip, Tanvir. Thank you all so much. I know there's a lot more of you that I haven't mentioned here, but thank you all so much for all your support. As we've mentioned, Calvin and I will be traveling over the next 2 weeks, so unfortunately, this will be the last Royal Report for a few weeks. We will be returning in about 3 weeks from now to the Royal Report, but we will continue to do the Royal Rebounds podcast. We will be mobile. Vinny will be here in the studio, and Calvin and I will be mobile on our phones or on our laptops. So we will still be available after every game to have fun and discuss everything with you all. We will be in Vegas next week, checking out some games in March Madness. We will also be in Sacramento, or I will be in Sacramento during the Celtics game, and also for the farewell to Arco. And then the week after that, I'm going to be doing some traveling to Arizona for a friend's bachelor party, so I will be mobile as well.
Yes, I'll actually be in Arizona as well. So it'll be a fun 2 weeks here for Barry and I. Don't worry, though. We are going to have plenty of content coming your way still, and we're going to be keeping up with the Kings and with the rest of the league as we head into the postseason. That being said, as we look ahead to the next couple of weeks, Barry and I will not have a Royal Report to bring you, but it does pretty much take us to the end of the season for Sacramento. There's just 14 games remaining. Tough slate of games to close it out for the Kings this upcoming week. 4 games. The Bulls, the Jazz, the Bucks. Barry, it is a daunting schedule the rest of the way here, and there is that all-important reunion matchup against Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers coming in a couple weeks as well.
Yeah, if you're rooting for the Kings to lose games and get a better draft pick, the schedule couldn't get much better for you. We currently have 14 games left. 6 of these are home games. 5 games are left against teams below 500, meaning 9 of these games are playoff teams. 2 games against the Suns. 2 games against the top 2 teams in the East. You also have a game against the Golden State Warriors, who are currently in 3rd place in the Western Conference. And as you mentioned, March 23rd against the Pacers will be a huge game, and we'll actually be here in the studio. It'll be one of the very few games in this whole stretch here where we will be back here in Maui in the studio watching the game and doing post-game before we fly into Arizona. So it's going to be an exciting couple weeks of basketball. If you guys miss us, you can hit us up on Instagram at Royal Rebounds. We will see you all after the game on Saturday. Thank you all so much for watching. And in the meantime, go Kings.
Yo, there's a new channel coming. Yee.